Hello, Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is your first time stopping by. Today we're going to be talking about all of my plans for both my spiritual practice, my journaling practice, and my envelopes for 2026. So we're going to unpack what I did last year. We're going to talk about what I'm doing this coming year. There's going to be a mix of content today involving things like tarot, journaling, and also an update on my faith and spirituality practice, which I will put the faith stuff near the end for those of you who are like not interested and would like to skip that. I'll put that stuff at the back of the video for you, but I do want to give a bit of a check-in on how everything's been going, and again, all of my sort of tarot and spiritual practice stuff kind of all in one fell swoop video, both what I did in 2025 and what I'm changing or updating for 2026. So if that is of interest to you, keep watching. First, just a quick reminder that in addition to being a content creator here on YouTube, I just love that phrase, hashtag sarcasm. In addition to making videos here on YouTube, I also am a deck creator and an author. I will throw a graphic up on the screen so you can check out my work if you are so inclined. But with that, let's get into it. So I think I'm going to kick off actually talking about decks, cards, envelopes. So let's talk about my envelope practice. I will try to remember to link the videos where I have gone into this process in more detail. And actually, while we chat, I'm going to pull out all of my stuff. So let me just get everything sorted here. But I have other videos where I talk about this process and what it's all about. But in a nutshell, essentially, this is a practice where instead of doing like month ahead readings that are more predictive in nature, I use envelopes to set aside a reading for myself for every month that I can open at some point in the month and also on the full moons. And I found this to work a lot better because I don't get in my head about what's like coming up. It doesn't feel as predictive, which works better for my practice. And it's kind of like having a little fun surprise every single month. So let's talk about what I did in 2026 for these two categories of envelope readings. And I will say I have a bit of a review of this process. So for my regular monthly envelopes, I did a combination of decks. I used the Diviner Definitions deck for a bit of like a word of the month. I used my Little Monsters Lenormand for a Lenormand reading, 3 cards. And then I had kind of a shadow light theme. So I used my first edition Mons Tarot, which I only use for myself, and my Borderless Deviant Moon Tarot for light and shadow for the month. And then I also used my full-size Wisdom of the Divine Feminine and Wisdom of the Shadow. Now, what I can tell you is this, while I sort my envelopes, what I can tell you is this, it was a bit too much for me. I do enjoy having a Lenormand reading for the month, and I have enjoyed having a word of the month. That was really great. I even really liked the idea that I had this shadow and light theming going on. But I will say I just got a little overwhelmed because I don't typically mix this many decks in a single reading for myself to begin with, except on rare occasion. And so it just kind of felt a little bit like overkill. It was a little too much. And it felt especially jarring because in 2024, when I did this practice, I actually used the Nameless One Tarot, and I just had a single tarot card in my month, if I remember correctly. Maybe that's wrong, but I feel like it was just one. I mean, you can feel free to fact check me because it's here on the channel. But and I did also have a Lenormand, I think. And I think I want to get back to that, where I have a Lenormand reading for the month and one tarot card. But one thing I really enjoyed about my Nameless One year was that the single tarot card that I had was one that was really like rich, like the guidebook had so much to offer, because of course the Nameless One is a deck that has this giant grimoire. So I was able to, when I pulled that card, get this like super meaty, super substantial reading. And it was like really delightful to have that card and then read all about it in the book. That was just really fun. And I kind of miss that. It's a great way to work with decks that I otherwise don't make time for because they feel like they're too much for like just a grab and go kind of reading. It lets me pull things into my practice that might otherwise get neglected, but that I'm really glad that I have. And so I think that's the thing that I missed in 2025 in my regular monthly readings was just, oh my gosh, it was just so much. And maybe that's also a reflection of where I was at in my life. I've just had a lot going on. I've had multiple projects on the go. I haven't been in a position of burnout with my creative work or my practices. I think I've been striking a really good balance for a long time with all of that. And yet I do find myself sort of yearning for more simplicity in my spiritual work and in my card practices for myself, I tend to have certain things that I just sort of go back to again and again and again. So while I enjoyed working with all these decks, I do think that doing it over again or doing it planning for 2026, I want to get back to a place of more simplicity. But let's just have a quick talk through of these decks kind of while I get ready to put them away. So Little Monsters, Lenormand. Let's talk about this first. This is a really, really adorable little Lenormand deck. Funny enough, I don't have the love for this that I do for the Little Monsters Tarot. And that's not fair to this deck necessarily, because at the end of the day, my Little Monsters Tarot is so near and dear, or sorry, my Mons Tarot, that's this, is so near and dear to my heart that there's nothing that can truly ever replace it, right? So it's kind of like not a fair comparison to make. I keep this because it sort of belongs in my Little Monsters / Mons Tarot family, but it's not on its own, I should say, a Lenormand that immediately grabs me because there's so many characters in the cards. And I actually prefer a Lenormand that is light on characters, except in cards where it calls for it. For example, the monster card, or the child card, or what's another good example? Like the rider is another one, yeah, where I expect to see a character. But when I have a clouds card, I kind of want it to be focused on just the clouds. There's something about that visually that when I'm working with Lenormand cards, I personally prefer. And I'm perhaps extra mindful of this right now because have been doing the work to I've been laying the groundwork for the Unicorn's Journey Lenormand, and Francesca and I are going to be working on that this year. But to give you an idea of my Lenormand aesthetic, like my preference, it's actually for something a little closer to, I would say, like a classic. I don't care for or about the playing card associations, but what I do like is when the image is very clearly focused on the symbol of the card. I want to immediately see dog, snake, fish, birds. I don't want to have to look past a lot of characters to get to the point of the card. And so this is sort of what I like in a Lenormand deck. And that's a personal preference thing. This is a really great one, by the way. If you're ever looking for something for like one of these like really good little classic ones, this is mass market and it's the Grand Tableau Lenormand. So things like this are cute because they go with the family. So if I'm working with my Mons Tarot and my Little Bug Oracle and this, I can put them together. But as for on its own, I think if I was just shopping a Lenormand deck, I don't think this is one I would have grabbed if it wasn't for my love of the family, so to speak. Now let's talk about diviner definitions. This is a really fun deck because there's so many cards in here. This is by Dr. Michael Anthony, and I was actually able to use the rest of the deck throughout the year, even though I had 12 cards spoken for, because there's just, look at how massive this deck is. Does it say how many cards? I think there's 100. Yeah, 111. So there are so many cards, but this works really well. Like, this is one of those decks that you can just you can put it next to anything. If you just want a clarifying word, a clarifying whatever, but also it works great as a color deck. So if you're looking for something that's going to help you get into sort of color, this is a great one. I don't really ever work with or need to reach for the dictionary, but it's formatted super cute and it does add something to the card, which is super fun. So this kind of gives you the short version of the word, so purpose, and then this goes in more depth. This is not one that I see talked about very often, and I think it's one of those decks that has been for sure under, what am I trying to say? Like, a hidden gem. It's a hidden gem, I feel like, in our Tarot Oracle world. So if you can still get this, I don't know if it's still in print. I'll have links to everything I'm talking about down below. But this is such a great one, and it really does work very well in a lot of situations. But in my envelope readings, it was probably my favorite part, to be honest. I loved seeing what my word of the month was going to be, and pulling wisdom from that just felt very attainable and accessible, and I loved that. Okay, so let's talk about the wisdom of the divine feminine and the wisdom of the shadow. So these also worked really well for me. Now, if you've seen my my video where I first talked through these both decks, if you saw my video where I first talked about these, you'll know that they really complement each other very, very well. So we have balance and transformation. The shadow sort of brings what needs to be looked at, and then I feel like the divine feminine brings the medicine. So here we have change, but what can help us move through that change? Our sacred union. Here we have reflection and sovereignty. There's something really like awe-inspiring that happens when you put these two together. Like, look at even what's happening in the heart space here and here. there's something really, really potent about it. So I really enjoy working with these together. My only regret for having them in my envelope readings is just that I wasn't able to bring the depth to them that I wanted. I feel like I just didn't sit with them enough because there was so much on the table that they didn't get enough of my attention. Now, I do plan to put these ones in storage because I'm going to be transitioning to these little pocket versions of the same decks. I think that these will be really fun to work with in this size. So I'm going to be moving these onto my shelf for a while and seeing what I think of that. And then these are going to be put back in their boxes. No. These are going to be put back into their boxes and just put away for a little while I move to using the smaller versions. But I really enjoy these. I've recommended them again and again. And I think if you're looking for something like in depth to work with either of these aspects, the shadow or the divine feminine, but for me, they're an inseparable duo. So that brings us to the Deviant Moon. This is a long love of mine. It is my favorite shadow work tarot. My singular regret for having this in my envelopes was I didn't have it available when I just needed to reach for it. That being said, though, there's something that really interesting that I noticed about myself over this past year is that this does not feel any longer like my go-to kick my ass deck. And it didn't occur to me that that would happen. This is still a really interesting deck. It's one that I plan to keep. But now, when I'm in the mood to get my butt kicked by a tarot deck, I reach for my Sassy Dragons, not safe for work. And maybe it's because this feels like my wife's voice. And I know that the way she butt kicks is always like, tells you what you need to hear, but in a very direct and blunt way, but also gives you the encouragement you need. And there's none of the dark, kind of shadowy, creepy vibes I get with Deviant Moon. I'm sure there's still a time and a place for Deviant Moon in my life, but I just don't feel like I need the aggression of the message and the shadow in this deck that I used to. There was a time in my life where I needed to be called out at this level, and I found that really, really helpful. And we even did an entire deck study of the Deviant Moon Tarot in my membership this year that was really fun. We kind of built our shadow council. It was really awesome. And whenever I need like the most confronting thing, I feel like this will always be my go-to. But it's just, I realized not what I need most of the time anymore. Now I need a voice like this when I want to or need that call out energy. I'll do it here because it will call me out, but it will also encourage me. And I find that that just meets me where I am a little bit better nowadays. So that deck is probably going to, it's just going to hang on my rack like normal, but I have a feeling it's not going to see as much use as it used to. And then of course we have my darling baby, the Mons Tarot. This is my first edition, so I only use it for myself anyway. I think the only thing, like I said, that made me kind of like similar to the, I guess, wait, was there any decks that I wished I could have just reached for in their entirety? I guess Deviant Moon was the only one that I kind of missed. And that was mostly because we did a deck study, but then I had the little mini, so that worked fine. I feel like I missed having the Mons Tarot in this particular copy available to me because I have 3 freaking editions of this deck. I was not without this deck. It's the perfect candidate for envelopes, except for the thing about this edition is I pull it just for myself, but my other copies, my travel edition and my 2nd edition borderless, are ones I tend to use for in a more general way. So this one kind of feels like my precious little baby, and it wasn't available to me this month, and that made me kind of sad, or this year. So I feel like it was fine, but I think if I had to do it again, I would have grabbed one of the other editions and put those copies of the cards in my envelopes, but I wasn't that smart this time, so there you have it. So that brings me to my full moon practice. So I'm going to take off these little stickies because I'm probably not going to worry about the dated stickers. So in my full moon practice, I used the Old Style Tarot, the Mysteries of the Black Madonna, the Mysteries of Mary, and near the end of the year, I also incorporated the Mysteries of the Red Madonna. So let me just pull these out and chit-chat a little bit about that practice. So this was definitely meant to be, for me, more of a spiritual practice. And so I had, when I started this process, these 3 decks. And this was meant to tie more into sort of, and I'm not going to get into detail, but I'll just say this was meant to tie more into my faith and spirituality journey. And it gave me a way to do that in the full moons that felt really good. What I kind of wanted from this was the ability to sort of spiritually deep dive on the full moons, because I feel like moon energy to me feels very reflective. It feels more spiritual in nature than, I don't know, than other times of the month. And it gave me that prompt to sort of slow down, that little nudge. And I like that. I don't think that the envelope practice needs to be one for full moon and one for each month. I think one a month is totally fine. In my case, I think started this because I happened to have bought these envelopes, or the first time I bought them, which was in 2024. They came with enough envelopes. Here we go. There's one. So the Red Madonna started showing up in August. They came with enough envelopes that I had 13 left after doing my 12 months. And I was like, well, that's perfect because sometimes there's 13 full moons in a year. And so I decided to start doing the full moons. And I do and have really enjoyed having a reason to pull an envelope for the new moon. And I do think I am going to do that again in 2026. Like I said, I think I'm just going to simplify my months. The other difference I did in 2025 from prior years is I didn't seal my envelopes so that I could reuse them. I just didn't see the purpose in having to rebuy these really beautiful soft parchment envelopes all over again. So I dated them with just the month, and then I just wrote the month and then full moon on them when I set these up for 2025, and I'm just going to keep using these same envelopes. So let me now talk through these decks. So my thinking with the old style tarot, and again, if you want to skip ahead, feel free, because I'm going to be, because of the subject matter of these decks, talking more along faith stuff. But here's the thing. I feel like this deck suited my desire to have something that felt like God, spirituality, or whatever energy was on the cards. And there is a lot of that sort of like man with the, this always reminds me of Danny's deck, Mystic Masters. There's a lot of like what feels like, I don't know, angel energy in this deck. And now that I say that, I'm not seeing any of them. And there's also a lot of like kind of godlike imagery where you have like the man with the big white beard. And again, I'm not really seeing it now. Maybe it was just the aesthetic. Yeah, there's an angel. It just kind of gave me a bit of those vibes. And I thought, oh, this might be a good way for me to pull in some of that energy if that's what I want to pull in. And it was going to be subjective. But this is mostly just here's an example. Now, the tower is also known as the house of God. And the lightning is meant to be sort of spiritual insight or divine insight of some kind. No matter how you want to like dress that up in whatever spirituality makes the most sense to you, or how you want to like view that. But that is one of the premises of the card. But I have to be honest, otherwise, there's nothing about the aesthetic of this deck that's really my personal style. So while this was fine, it felt a little like not quite the right fit for where I'm at today in my spiritual journey. So this ended up falling a little flat for me in practice. It functioned perfectly well, but it's not really something that I plan to probably keep in my collection or continue with. Now, with that being said, I love having this dichotomy of the Mary's decks. So we have the Mysteries of Mary here in the center. We have the Mysteries of the Black Madonna, and then we have Mysteries of the Red Madonna or of Mary Magdalene. I had a hard time with these because I felt like with 3 of them, or even with just 2, because the guidebook entries are so in-depth for all of these decks, I felt like it felt like homework. It felt like it was too much reading to do all at once in a month, and I wasn't able to sort of mine the richness from it that I really wanted to. So I think if I'm going to continue to use these in my full moon readings, which I think I do want to, I think I'm going to pick just one and just focus on that one for an entire year. So for 2026, because I can't really differentiate. I never really got the chance to get to know their individual energies enough to be able to differentiate, which is sure a bummer, you know? So I feel like for 2026, I'm going to pick one, and I want to pick the Mysteries of the Red Madonna because that's the one I'm currently the most drawn to. So that is my plan. The rest of these are still very safe in my collection. I think they're beautiful decks. And I think what I might do is literally work with a different one each year in my envelopes and see how that feels. So Mysteries of Mary and Mysteries of the Black Madonna are going to get put away for 2026. And I'm going to focus on only working with the Mysteries of the Red Madonna and see if by having a focus of one of the Mary decks to work with, if I can get a more rich practice. And all I'm going to do is have one card from this deck per month, and that's it. So I'm going to, since I've got them out now, actually, I'm going to do that now. I'm going to probably put this on speed up or just skip ahead once these are loaded up. But I'm going to focus on a different card for each full moon. And it's going to be from this deck specifically. There. So I have one Mysteries of the Red Madonna in each of my full moon envelopes for 2026. So now let's talk about what I'm going to do in my regular monthly envelopes for 2026. here is my plan. So I do want to use Lenormand again, but I want to bring the richness back in because I'm going to be doing Tarot and Lenormand only. I'm not going to have an Oracle deck too. So for my Lenormand deck in 2026, I plan to use Robert M. Place's Burning Serpent Oracle. This is actually by, it says it's by Rachel Pollack with cards by Robert M. Place. So the book is by Rachel Pollack, and then it says conceived by Robert M. Place and Rachel Pollack. So they co-created this. This is a Lenormand deck where visually it works great because of course it's honed in on the central image, which I love, but there's a whole extra layer of spiritual energy to this particular version of the Lenormand, as you can tell by the rather beefy book. So here's my thinking. Instead of a 3-card spread, I'm going to do a 2-card spread per month so I can look at a pair of cards, because I feel like that's the simplest way to work with Lenormand. Because I have a more in-depth book to work with this Lenormand, I want to think about how it functions as a single pairing instead of 3 cards, which is actually, when I think about it, the way that I tend to read Lenormand is mostly in sets or pairs. So I'm going to go ahead and shuffle this in, and this will be 2 cards, 1 Lenormand pair per month for 2026. So that's going to be my Lenormand. And then for my tarot, I have decided to pull in the Spirit Keepers Tarot Revelation Edition, and then I can read and work through the Book of Maps by Benebell Wen. I'm really excited to get into this. I feel like this is the perfect choice for a yearly envelope practice because, much like the Nameless One tarot, there's a nice chunky book so I can have that quiet time of sort of getting into and reading. And I have so much respect for this book and the depth that you can find in here. And I feel like doing a classic for the month energy obstacle advice reading with the Spirit Keepers Tarot is going to be just the perfect thing for me for 2026. I can pull this out when I pull my cards, read about them. Same thing here. I can read about the Lenormand. So I've got the richness, but it's less chaos on the table. I will have a 3-card tarot, or excuse me, a 2-card Lenormand reading and a 3-card tarot reading side by side. And I think that's going to work really, really well. So the only thing I've got to decide with the Spirit Keepers is, if you're familiar with this deck, there are actually 3 different significator type cards you can use for, I guess you could say, the Fool. And so I want to choose one intentionally and pull out the others. So let me see if I can find those real quick. I still remember this because I colored this card in my first edition Spirit Keepers coloring book. Okay, so we have the Initiate, the Seeker, and the Keeper. Okay, so I'm going to, we have 3 ideas here. We have Spirit in Petition of Spirit, Spirit in Search of Science, and Spirit in Search of Experience. I think that for 2026, my goal is actually Spirit in Search of Experience. So I'm going to put these 2 cards in the, actually I'm going to leave them on top. I'm going to shuffle in the Initiate so that if it shows up, it's aligned with my goal for 2026. And then again, I'm probably going to speed this up or just cut it out, but I'm going to go ahead and prep my 3-card readings for every single month and my 2-card Lenormand duos for every single month. I don't peek at the cards at all. I just tuck them into their envelope, and that is how I do it. So I'm going to get started on that, and I'll see you in a second. Okay, so I have my 2-card Lenormand pulls and my 3-card Spirit Keepers Tarot all loaded up into my months. I'm going to go ahead and buddy these up the way that I normally do. I have a place on a shelf where I keep these, and I just pull the envelopes for that month as appropriate, and I am really excited to work with this particular combo for 2026. I will obviously report back about how it goes, either partway, sometimes I'll check in partway through the month in various videos, maybe in my deck reviews or whatnot, and let you know how it's been going. But I'm excited about this combo. I think what I have here between my full moons and my months is something that's going to feel spiritually rich, meaningful, and will let me work with decks that maybe otherwise get a little bit neglected in my practice because they're the kind of decks that just require more of a time commitment. Sitting down once a month or twice a month, once at any point in the month, and then once around the full moon is such a great way to have like a touch point with my practice. And it's so low effort once I've set it all up. And I love that about it. It's just easy breezy to come into my room, sit at my table, pull an envelope, sit and like unpack the reading for myself. I love this practice, and I'm so excited to continue it again in 2026. This will be my 3rd year. Right? I think I started it in 2024. Yes, 2025, 2026. Yeah, so this will be my third year, so I'm really excited. And I got to repurpose all of my envelopes, and my iPhone now tells me when the moon is full, so easy peasy to keep track of that. So I don't need to rewrite the dates. Good to go. So now that we have discussed my envelope situation for 2025 and 2026, let's talk about my journaling and planning systems for 2025 and 2026. What I didn't bring on camera to show actually is this is not as scary a stack as it looks, because this is 2 years worth. This is last year and what I'm doing for this upcoming year. But in any case, I did not bring my planning system because my main planning system as far as content planning, scheduling, etc., I do that mostly in my iPad in GoodNotes and Digital Plan, and it's been fantastic. I haven't really changed much about that. But I do want to talk about what else I'm doing in 2026, kind of what's been working over 2025, like all that stuff. So if you're into the journaling stuff, this is the section for you. Okay, so I have this just as a reference point so I can show off ink colors because I'm a nerd like that, and this is my swatch book. So the new thing that I added in 2026 that was incredibly helpful was a classic old style bullet journal. This is actually an A6 Leuchtturm bullet journal collab. So it's a little pocket notebook, and it actually lasted a lot longer than I thought it would. I just got to pull some more stuff out of the papers and things I had stuffed in the back pocket. This worked really, really well. I set up a key for myself at the beginning of the year, which I didn't really use. I used some of these things. I don't think I need this key anymore. So I'm probably going to ditch this particular bookmark because I just don't think I need it anymore. But essentially, I use this mostly just for daily logging. So as an example, I also did other random stuff in here. So I would set up for myself a month. I don't think there's anything that like really matters. Yeah, so I set up a month for myself. There's some stickers that come in here. Let's see. There's like a little sticker sheet that has like the months and stuff. So I would put like the number of the month, and I would turn it this way, landscape, date it 1 through 31. And this is where I would kind of keep track of like month things so that I always had this to just quickly reference. I can throw this in a purse. It's really convenient and pocketable. And that's why I like it, because it's unlike my iPad, which I can't always have with me. And I do sync my GoodNotes to my iPhone, but sometimes it's a little bit of a pain to just see it. This lets me see my big picture stuff, appointments, video things, live streams, that sort of stuff. And then on the daily, this just gives me sort of a task list. What am I working on? And it lets me sort of check that sort of thing off. And then I did some doodles. I had like a bit of a thing. And I can just kind of log little things too. Sometimes there's some memory keeping that I do in here in really, really basic ways. But it's kind of like worky day, yuck. Just different things going on. And I really like being able to just come in and make like a basic checklist and then just work on it. Just classic bullet journal style. So this worked really well for me throughout 2025. Sometimes I even like did multiple days on a page here. Super simple. But I like knowing that I can use a full page, and I wanted something similarly compact for 2026. So I went ahead and got the Sterling Ink 2026 full year daily planner. And I put, look how perfectly matched this is, but I put a pen holder on this. So I can just I got this green ink everywhere. You'll see more of that in a minute. I just had a whole moment with it yesterday. Anyway, what I like about this is that it is a page per day. And I don't know how well you can see this, but there is actually a little time log. It goes from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. down the side. So if I have appointments, I can actually, there's even a line. There's like a dot right there down the middle of the page. So I can split the page down the middle. On the left side, I can note any appointments or time-dependent things I have to do in the day. And then on the right side, I've got the perfect amount of space for a task list. What am I working on? What am I trying to accomplish on that day? It's dated, so I don't need to date it. And it's still got the monthly section. So instead of having to do this list style, I can actually write in appointments. And I have space underneath to future log if I need to. But because I'm only in here, I would future log anything that was from that month forward. So if it wasn't in December, it would go down here, because then the next time I would make a month, I would have to fill in any January things and so forth and so on. I don't think I'll have to use the future log as much in this style, because I can literally just flip forward to that month and write in whatever appointment I need to write in. I pair my daily tracker with my Pilot Vanishing Point pen. This is really, I'm going to talk inks too because I'm a nerd like that, but this, I've just been keeping the classic Pilot cartridge ink in. And I do wash out these cartridges and save them, at least a few of them. So if I ever run out, I've got quite a few of these little packs of cartridge ink from Pilot. But if I run out, I can just refill with whatever ink that I choose. If I do run out, my plan is to just refill with my Noodler's X Feather, which is a black ink. But I just like something serviceable. I like how easy it is to get the vanishing point out and just start immediately writing. It came with this little pencil board from Sterling Ink, which I think I will use. But I'm going to just move over my tabs right away because there's no reason not to. December was in here for some reason, but December was in the monthlies, but not in the dailies. So it doesn't really do me any good. So I'm just going to pop my month in about halfway. And then I'm going to go to my first daily page for January 1st and take my Today tab and move it over like that. There. Same system, new year, even easier than before. And this is, as you can see, profile-wise, while it's quite a bit thicker, it is width-wise with my pen, the same size. What I was having to do in 2025, because this didn't have a pen holder, is I was just like clipping it like to the front. I'm trying to see if there's anything here in my little papers and stuff to the side that I want to move over. But I don't think this thing doesn't even have like a pocket, and I didn't want to put a cover. Yeah, here's my Pilot Vanishing Point black ink pen test. I don't think I want to tuck any of these other things in here. So I'll have to go deal with all of this stuff and put those things somewhere else. So I'll do that later. So yeah, that is my setup for my daily logging. And again, this is just like daily task list, just keeping myself on track. It's good for me to just write down anything that's going on that day. So my touch point is that in the morning, once I'm sort of settling in for my work day, I'll just turn to my day, check out what I didn't finish the day before that I maybe wished I would have, and then I'll make my list for the day, and I just work from that list as I go through, and it's done and dusted. Super, super easy. Actually, I might as well put my pencil board into my Today page. There, ready to go. The other planner that got regular use throughout 2025 is my faith planner. So I'm not going to get too in the weeds with this because I feel like that belongs at the end of this video, but this is something that I used throughout the year, and I got a ton of use out of it. And this was a Sterling Ink what is this called? An N2 compact. This is a fresh one, and this is last year's, like, for reference. It gets quite puffed up. But I have like a Sunday practice I do in here where I pull cards just to like give a quick glance. Like I do card pulls, I do notes about what I'm studying. I've added in like fold outs of side studies I've done. I have a gratitude practice that I keep in here and just other things related to my spiritual practice. So I'm just literally moving that exact same system over into a new book. I'm not going to move this till the very, very last minute though, because I'm still using this and I'm filming this just before the very end of the year. I've got a few days left in this and then I will move over. I'm going to be using the same pen as I move into 2026 for my spiritual planner. And this is an Edison Beaumont unicorn pen. And throughout 2026, I'll show you which ink I was using for the whole year. It was really nice, actually. I used a ton of it, but it's this Sailor Fugi Shikiori Sugat. I slaughtered that, but it's this color. It's really pretty. It's like a pinky purple. It's got some pretty shading on it, but you don't really see it in regular writing. But then this year, with my unicorn blood, with my unicorn pen, I'm actually going to go back to inking this pen up with unicorn blood, which is a limited edition shade by Organics Studio. I'm going to shake it. It's got a lot of shimmer in it. I don't know if you can see it. Where is it? There it is. I don't know if you can see some of the sheen. There's some silver shade shimmer in this. But otherwise, it's just like a pinky purple, great, fabulous color. Love it. It matches this pen really well, obviously, for obvious reasons. So I'm going to re-ink this with this, but it was really fun to use this purple color. I also really like just having a pen ink combo for the whole year. I used like half my little bottle of this Sailor ink throughout 2025, and it was just great. So I'm going to continue with the same pen. This is a very, very comfortable, lightweight pen, and I do a lot of writing in that particular journal, so I'm excited to continue with this as just a different ink combo. So I'll be doing that for 2026. Okay, this next combo, this next journal, I don't know. I'm not 100% married to this yet. This may change, but I picked up this really adorable Sanrio notebook when I went down to see Dawn, and it's literally got these cute sections. So there's a Hello Kitty section, there's a Kuromi section, a Cinnamoroll, a My Melody, a Pompurin, and a Pochico. It's so stinking cute. And it's just like lined paper in each one. What I think I'm going to do, we'll see. I've picked a pen. This is a Did I already forget? A Jinhao, I forget the number of this pen. I talked about them recently, but it's something 10. It's a 10 something. Anyways, it's very similar to the Pilot Vanishing Point. It's not as good, obviously. It doesn't have a gold nib. The inks in this tend to dry out, so it's a pen that needs to be used regularly if it's inked up. I'm going to be inking this up with this is one of my favorite inks of all time. This is Black Swan in Australian Roses by Noodlers. It is this color here. It's a really dark pink, but it's also very sturdy. It just performs really well. It's no fuss. It's kind of like a blackened pink. So it kind of looks like that when you're writing with it. I'm going to ink this up with that. And I think my plan for this is I'm supposed to be joining a D&D game in 2026, and I think I'm going to keep my campaign notes of our games in here, where I can just be messy and a little bit less precious, and I'm just going to start in the Hello Kitty section and just go through, because I have been like hoarding this notebook, because I've been trying to think of like what I can use it for, where I have all these different sections, like I need to use these divided sections. It's not happening. So I'm just going to like use it. And like if I move from Hello Kitty into Kuromi, that's totally fine. Part of me wants to save these dividers and do something with them, but I'm not crafty like that. So I don't know what I would do with them. But anyway, that's my plan. D&D notebook. That's what I'm doing with that. So that's going to join me in 2026. This I picked up at the end of 2025. It's the No Pressure book journal. I'm still using this. I changed the pen out to a Kakuno with a gold toned nib. It's not really gold. Medium point. This has a brown ink in it, which is the same as the ink that was in it before, but I was using one of those Jinhao pens and it just kept drying out on me. But this is, oh no, I wasn't. I was using a Dryden pen. Anyway, same ink, same point size, so it's basically the same, but this has got J. Herb and Lee Dete, which is basically tea ink in it. This is a fun journal because I don't feel any pressure about this one. I just pop in and add my book reviews and my star ratings. Don't read this if you don't want spoilers, but I put a quote or two from the book. I give my thoughts. I have a star rating system, and I'm just kind of keeping track of what I read in here. And just like the title says, this is such a great like little reading tracker if you just want someplace to jot down notes about what you've read, but you don't want it to feel like kind of bonkers. I did put some dates here. I should probably add these because I'm going to do that now. I read this one in December. I just finished Onyx Storm. So I'm trying to put the date that I finished it. I'm pretty sure I finished, if that was September, I read that fast. I think these were both October, actually. I'm going to say, and Tusk Love, I read in October, I think. Good enough. At least it keeps me kind of on track. So this is fun. I like having this. I switched to the Kakuno because if you want a pen that you can just ink up and like ignore it and like throw it in your bag and like use it again later, the Kakunos are so great. They're fuss free. They always work. They never hard start for me. They're just easy. So yeah, I switched out to a Kakuno because I don't use this journal very often. So being able to go to it with a pen that's not fussy, so good. Morning pages I kind of abandoned. I did them for a bit and then I stopped. And I think part of the reason that I stopped is because I was doing this thing where I was rotating through all these pens and inks, and that was super fun. I loved the effect. I showed it in a previous video where like I could kind of like have all these different ink colors, and I loved that. This is super personal because this is like no filter or whatever. But for 2026, I'm just going to continue on with this practice when I want to, like when I wake up in the morning and I just want to journal. You can see I've got all kinds of ink happening here, but this is actually, what is the brand? Asvine. This is an Asvine pen, and it's a piston filler, and it is currently inked up with this green called Lures of the Lock, which somehow in the process of inking this pen, I got ink all over myself. This is a shimmery green ink, and it is a medium point pen. It should do fine. And it's got this like little ink window so you can like see, you can like swish it back and forth and see if you've got ink in there or not. But this pen it's a little bit big, but as long as I don't post the cap, it's very comfortable to hold, and I think it'll be good for like longer writing sessions. This ink has a lot of shading qualities. I don't know if you can tell, but like it's got kind of like it's lighter sometimes, it's darker sometimes, and I just really like that effect. Anyway, I feel like if I just stick with one ink, and I think the green is really fun and it matches this pen really well, then I'll be more likely to pick this up and not have it feel so fussy and just write. Sometimes one page, my goal is usually 3 pages, and this is a B6 size. And I actually set this up as a diary style journal a long time ago. I also did some like funky like doodling things in here. I was just playing around. But I have, these are some inserts that I made with Tomoe River paper. So I've got some like extra inserts where I can just like do whatever. And yeah, I think I'm going to continue maybe revisiting this practice now that I've made it less fussy and see, because it was feeling really good when I was doing that. But my main commitment as far as personal journaling every day is going to be in this. I picked up the Sterling Ink 5-year diary. This is really nice. It's on Cosmo Airlight paper, which is one of my favorite papers of all time. Where's the stickers they sent me? I don't know why I have this empty envelope in here, but I do. Okay. So the way that this is this is an undated. Oh, I made a note with the other pen, actually. I made a note with this Asvine pen because yesterday, so this is the 27th of December when I'm filming this video, and yesterday I was prepping all this stuff for this video, and I managed to, look at this, I managed to get some of that Lures of the Loch ink in this book. And it made me so mad, and then I realized that that's actually kind of perfect because all of a sudden this book doesn't feel precious now. But anyway, how this is set up to work is you have your various years. So my way of distinguishing between the years is going to be by ink color. So I did a little entry here where I explained, where is it? Here it is. I did an entry where I explained that I got that ink on the page. And then I made a note for 2026. This is the pen I'm using. It is my Bennu Mandrake pen. It's a medium point, and I'm using Irishizuku Tsukiyo. And I literally gasped out loud when I wrote this little entry because the thing about Cosmo Airlight paper, it does take a little longer to dry than Tomoe River paper, but it is the most incredible paper for showing all the qualities of an ink. Like you can see it here with the green ink, Lures of the Loch. You can see, if you're a fountain pen ink nerd, you can kind of see the shading and the way that some of the spits are darker, some are lighter, and it really shows up. But this ink is like a go-to kind of tealish blue shade that I've had forever. It's one of my first fountain pen inks. And it literally, I can see some red sheen or like variation in the color, but like this is Tomoe River paper. And if I show you that same ink, it's this one. Do you see how when it pools, sometimes you get a little bit of red popping through, but it's very subtle. And normally it just looks like a blue ink. But on this Cosmo Airlight paper, it literally has that, I can see the shading the sheening coming through that red, and I was shocked. I see some variation in color. It's such a beautiful ink, but every other time I've written with it, it's felt very basic, and so it tends to get ignored, but it performs really well. So I was like, this will be perfect for my 2026 ink color for my 5-year journal, and I literally gasped because it's so beautiful on this paper. So I'm really excited about that. That makes me really happy. Anyway, back to the point. The way a 5-year journal works is that every day you just write like a little mini diary entry. It might be a sentence. You might write a quote. You might write something interesting from your day. Anything. But then the next year you'll write on the next line down, and then so forth and so on. So this will be 26. If I continue the practice yearly, it would be 27, 28, 29, and year 2030, which is wild. But then as you're writing each entry, you have the benefit of seeing what you wrote on the previous years, which I think is so cool and special. So I'm actually really, really excited about this. It did not come with a pen loop. I did add this pen loop. It does have a big pocket in the back, but that's all it is. It's just daily entries. There is a section, I think, at the end of every month. Yeah, where it's not dated. So like September 30th, which is the last day of the month, is here. So you can kind of have a monthly wrap-up entry if you want. But my goal is to keep this by the bed and first thing in the morning do an entry for the previous day, rather than trying to commit to writing like on the day because I'm not very disciplined that way. But so I figure I'll write a quick entry in here, and then if I'm up for it, I will add I will continue writing in my daily journal. But this is one of my favorite pens ever, and I get to use it all year, which makes me really excited. In fact, my 2 favorite pens of all time are actually this Bennu Mandrake, this Beaumont, as far as like my fancy fountain pens, which sounds so silly to say because of course my Pilot Vanishing Point is, of these 3, I think this was my most expensive. This one might have been. No, I think this one was. But these are actually my 3 like priciest pens, and they're all in full rotation for the year, which makes me really happy. So it means everything's getting good use, and that's just awesome. So that is my journaling update for 2026 for those of you interested in that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and move on to my faith and spirituality journey update. So if you're not interested in that kind of thing, because I'm going to be talking about the Bible, I'm going to be talking about some Christian stuff, feel free to tune out. Totally get it. No harm, no foul. If you are curious about what I'm talking about, or this freaks you out because you haven't encountered this on my channel before. I have talked about it. I don't talk about it a lot, and I try to be mindful of other people when I do talk about it and section it out, so you can skip it if you want. But I do have an entire live stream called Charting My Spiritual Path, where I kind of like talked about the beginning stages of this journey and what I'd been experiencing. So don't worry, not going all Doreen Virtue on anybody. Nobody panic. Still into my folk magic, still loving tarot, finding no conflict. I'm all good. But anyway, now with that said, I'm going to update on how that's all been going. Okay, so I got to dig through my piles. So as a bit of a follow-up, 2025, I was reading through the Bible. I thought I was going to get through the entire thing. So this is my main, I guess you could say, study Bible. This is where I put my notes. You can tell it's already getting a little bit, it's not that chunky because I really did most of my stuff in the first sections, but I did actually finish reading the Old Testament in 2025. But I didn't do as much journaling in here as I wanted to after, gosh, I mean, really, I only did my journaling straight in here a lot, and I wasn't doing my reading straight in here as much after, I would say, gosh, I don't know when it stopped. Maybe about like, it must have been around Numbers or Deuteronomy, maybe. I've got some notes in here. What I typically did was read elsewhere, essentially. I would pick another Bible to read in, like a study Bible, because once I was comfortable with having this as my like double check, because to back up, if you missed my original video, my Faith and Spirituality original video, I talked about the NRSV, the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, the updated edition, being the version that I sort of trust the most as far as translation, because I feel like this one took a lot of modern scholarship. It's one of the most recent editions of the Bible that there is. There's another edition I also trust. I'll talk about that why I'm going to be using or kind of leaning into that in 2026. But this is still my go-to. And this is where I dump any notes. Like if I watch a talk or read something interesting in a book about a passage or I study anything, the notes always go in here. And I really like that. I did a whole study of some of the more famous like clobber passages that are used against LGBTQ people in here, and like did a whole deep dive and did my own studying on that stuff. I have side quested a lot throughout this study, but I did manage to make my way all the way through, including I read these apocryphal books. I did not do a deep dive study on any of these, but I read all the way through the Old Testament, which brings me to the book of Matthew, which I have actually started, but I haven't started studying. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But I made my way through all of this in 2025. And it was actually a really incredible journey. I have to say that having the context and the full narrative really has changed a lot for me. I think it's very easy if you're like me, you were exposed to a lot of religion growing up, and that religion was always sort of piecemeal and cherry-picked, and like hearing specific verses or stories that had a big impact. Seeing them all in context has been really, really incredible. In fact, funny enough, one of my favorite books of the Old Testament was actually Ecclesiastes. Where is it? Where is our Ecclesiastes? Which is funny because nobody seems to like Ecclesiastes. I'd love to do like a full study of it. But the whole point of this is literally futility. It's like everything has its time. Now, this is actually the book that talks about like there's a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up. Some of us have heard that. But the entire book is literally one person talking about like nothing matters. Nothing you do matters at the end of the day. And what's really interesting is there's a lot here about kind of carpe diem, a little bit about like memento mori, thoughts about how like everything is kind of pointless because at the end of the day, like we're all going to the same place kind of thing, like we're all dying. It's very, very interesting. And some of the translations of some of the phrases in here have been tricky, and getting into a little bit of like intellectual study of this was really fun for me. The prophets were a very interesting experience as well. And there was a really interesting book, let me grab it, that I read that actually helped with the prophets quite a bit, but it's a little bit dense. It's called The Prophetic Imagination by Walter Brueggemann. Reading this, but also listening to a lot of commentary about people talking about the prophets and what their role was, especially from a more progressive lens, has been very interesting, because the prophets were essentially usually coming after and calling out the people in power in that time and space. So the prophets were like calling out the royalty. They were calling out hypocrisy. They were calling out not taking care of the lesser classed people of the society at the time, right? Like the poor, the widows. They were calling out like abuses of power. Essentially, they were the activists in their time in a way. And it's been really interesting to dig into this. There's a lot of really wild stuff in the prophets, which can take you into some places. But to understand that their job was basically to challenge power and challenge systems of power was very, very interesting. And you see that show up again and again. So that was kind of a cool little side quest that I ended up doing in 2025. This book, I would say, is a difficult read. If you're interested in the subject matter, I wouldn't say like go right to this, but you might want to look up some videos talking about Walter Brueggemann's take on the prophets, or reading some progressive, if this is a study that you've been doing at all, or you've been exploring any of this stuff in 2025 or plan to in 2026, I would say go back to my faith and spirituality video. I list a ton of resources. I think I did go back and add links to a lot of the resources that I mentioned in the description box, but there are some really great resources from modern progressive scholars and people like Dan McClellan, Pete Enns of the Bible for Normal People podcast, Marcus J. Borg, who you'll see coming up in this chunk of this video, who I find are just really good at helping you sort of unpack in a progressive, inclusive way that is really, really helpful. Anyway, so the prophets were at times a little bit, they're kind of wild and crazy and extreme, but in a way that is very interesting when you look at it through a lens of like, wow, these were like the activists of their time within the context of their spirituality. So that was really interesting. Anyway, punchline is I made it all the way through to the New Testament. Like I said, I have just started to read Matthew, but I decided that 2026 was going to be my New Testament deep dive. So yeah, this is what I was working on mostly in 2025, but the Bible that I was spending most of my time in actually reading was this one. This is an NLT, right? Yeah, this is an NLT translation. It's a little bit easier to read, like line by line, than the NRSV, which this is fine to read. It's just a little bit drier in the language, I guess. I spent a lot of time in this version. And I also spent some time, especially in difficult sections, in the Message, which is it's somewhere between a translation and a paraphrase, but it's written like legitimately in such plain speak that it's good if you get fatigue from the way that things are written. But NLT reads almost as easily as the Message. So I would say like if you're torn, I feel like this one's really good. But I like study Bibles because then what happens is if I'm in a section, there's usually a decent amount of footnotes. There's sometimes some like little character snapshots, which are interesting. I find the footnotes helpful in this one because they feel more scholarly. My favorite study Bible, and the one that I constantly go back to again and again and again, though, is the cultural backgrounds one, which is where you'll see these like little articles I glue into my Bible are all from cultural backgrounds. Like you'll see them throughout. So whenever I find something interesting, I have a second copy of cultural backgrounds. So whenever I see something interesting in there, I will actually cut it out and put it into, like I'll tip it into my Bible using Tomoe River paper, which you can't even tell. It's like almost the same as the Bible paper. But yeah, so I really like doing that. But for just like every day, just a little bit of study notes, I found that this one was really great because it gave me some notes at the bottom, but not so much that I got overwhelmed. And I really liked some of the little call out articles here. And this is a study Bible written by like women scholars, which is great. But yeah, I kind of fell off this around, I would say once I got through all the history, I think by the time I was in the prophets, I was actually doing most of my reading on my phone in the Bible app because it was just convenient. And so I wasn't really in this very much, but it was really helpful through some of the drier chunks of the Old Testament for sure to just have something interesting to kind of read and dip into. So this was really good. I feel like what I've decided I like to do is to park all my notes whenever I encounter something interesting or I hear something, I'll come in here and I'll make a note in here. So I'm parking all of my notes in here as I make them, but I enjoy being in different study Bibles to read and get different bits of information. So this is the one I mostly referred to in 2025, but I'm going to put this one away for 2026, and I'm going to try to narrow the focus. We'll see. I did continue reading the Bible again for the first time, so I am through the entire thing now up to the New Testament section. So this one has a section on the prophets. This is another one that talks about the prophets was that Proverbs? That was Proverbs. Where are the prophets? Here they are. This is another one that talks about the prophets through that sort of more progressive lens. This is a book by Marcus J. Borg I talked about in my live stream video where I got into all the detail. This, so good. So good. Can't wait to continue reading this as I go through the New Testament in 2026. Did I just lose my bookmark for the New Testament? Oh, there it is. Okay. I've been flagging and highlighting like crazy in this one, so plan to continue that. But I also did get another book by the same author. So this is Reading the Bible Again for the First Time, covers the whole thing, but this is Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time. So I'm hoping to get into this also as I go through the New Testament in 2026. The things that I'm most excited about. Okay, so for my study Bible, I'm excited to get into this. This is new. This is called Connecting Scripture, New Testament. This is by a CSB, Christian Standard Bible translation, which I don't think I have anything else in the CSB. I might have one other, actually. But anyway, this is New Testament only, so it's so thin. It's so weird. But what this one does, and why I'm excited, is it uses this green-blue color coding system. You'll see green and blue in here. So to specifically reference whenever the New Testament is either quoting the Old Testament or is paraphrasing the Old Testament. So I think it's green is direct quotes. No, blue is direct quotes. Green is, I think, references. And then it has in the study notes how it ties back into the Old Testament. So this is very specifically notes designed to help you connect New Testament stuff to Old Testament stuff. And that's really convenient because actually there's a lot of stuff I found in a lot of my studies where things have been misinterpreted in the New Testament because they're actually specifically referencing Old Testament stories, Old Testament quotes. There's something specific that Jesus says at one point in his story that gets misinterpreted all the time, and it's a direct quote from a prophet from the Old Testament. And it's him quoting the prophet intentionally, obviously, we would assume. So yeah, this helps to connect the two. So I'm hoping to use this as a study reference as I move through the New Testament. So I will read the New Testament section of reading I'm doing, I'll show you the Bible I'll be reading in, but I'll be reading it in one translation. Then I'll be referring to this for study notes. This is kind of what I'm thinking, because I feel like this is so much less reading to do in 2026, so I'm hoping to go quite a bit deeper. But my goal is to use this as my sort of study reference. Hello. Here we go. And actually, I was torn between different types of different ones to read, but I think I'm going to read in this one. This is called the Abide Bible. This is an NET, New English Translation. And again, getting a little bit nerdy here, but the NET is very interesting because this was sort of like a crowdsourced translation in a way. Like I say that, but it's kind of like it was a team of scholars. They actually have an edition of the Bible called the Full Notes, the NET Bible Full Notes edition, which you can access on apps. And it's literally like you'll have a single passage and then it'll be like all notes, and it's all about how and why they made the translation decisions they did. So there's a lot of geeky integrity decisions about how they translated different passages. This, though, is meant to be more of, I think, of a devotional sort of style. So as you read, you'll get like these sections that will say contemplate or journal. So this is meant to be more reflective. And the way the text is laid out, so if I go to the beginning, I think I've already got it bookmarked actually, yeah. If I go to the beginning of Matthew, which is where I'll be starting, you get a little introduction with some historical and literary context. And then as you get into the reading, you get these sections of like picture it or meditate, contemplate. There's some artwork imagery you'll see occasionally in here. So this is like more of an immersive, I feel like, reading experience. And I want to sort of take it in a more reflective way and then move into the study phase so that I can kind of do a 1-2 punch in a way. So that's my hope for reading/studying in 2026. I do also have another version that I may also read alongside because it's just absolutely beautiful. But this is the First Nations version. So if in any translation, there's usually an introduction to that translation or to that version that explains like what it is, what the philosophy was, and how they decided to translate or share the text. This is actually put out by a council called the First Nations Version Council, and it tells what the people are and what their heritages are, what tribes they're associated with, and it talks about the other Native people involved, who consulted, who supported, who took place in it. But what's really beautiful about this, I was first encountered this version actually in a video I had watched. And the person in the video was sharing the First Nations version of the Lord's Prayer in here, and it is so incredibly beautiful. So instead of Jesus, they actually call him, instead of God, they call it the Great Spirit or Creator. And what is the name for Jesus? It's like Creator Sets Free or something. Hold on. Instead of Jesus, they call him Creator Sets Free. So the whole thing is written in a native storytelling style, and it's absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. Like, here is the record of the ancestry of Creator Sets Free, the chosen one, a descendant of much loved one, David, and a father of many nations, Abraham. From father of many nations, Abraham, to much loved one, David, his ancestors were. But when I tell you the way this is written, instead of sin, it's like the bad road, and holiness or virtue is like the good road or the right road. It's so beautiful. Like, listen, you can even listen to how they've named the books. Gift from Creator tells the good story. That's Matthew. War Club tells the good story. That's Mark. Shining Light tells the good story. That's Luke. And it's really incredible. Small Man to the Secret Family and Village of Desire for Ephesians. And so you get this very, very different perspective when you read in here. And it always takes my breath away how it breaks down the point and gets away from the dogma, because it's telling it in a way that is meant to feel like rich story. Not to say that obviously the Bible isn't, but it's like the original versions that we usually refer to isn't. But I think this is really, really beautiful way to look at the text. Yeah, anyway, I'm going on and on. So anyway, that's what I'm thinking I'm going to do, is probably do my reading, potentially read it first in this, then maybe read it in this, and then maybe study in this. That's kind of what I'm thinking as my plan. And then referring to these just for sort of side content. So that's what I'm doing in 2026 as far as study is concerned. And then depending on how that goes and how quickly I move through all of that, I may end up doing more. But I always have mini studies, side studies going throughout the year based on content I'm watching, subjects I'm dipping into. And I still end up making notes. Like, I've already made a bunch of notes in New Testament just from different things I've seen, different stories I've dipped into. I did some stuff throughout Advent to sort of dip into some of those stories and made notes about that. And so, yeah, it's just kind of an ongoing process. It's continuing to unfold. It's still feeling really, really good. And I'm still doing it and kind of meeting this all on my terms, which feels excellent. So I just wanted to sort of update. I know I've gotten some questions about that. It's all going very well, and it hasn't changed anything about my core beliefs. It's just weaving in very nicely. To me, it's no different than any other kind of deity work we might do or see in our community. So as always, though, if you ever have questions, you can DM me or email me. But yeah, this is just part of my spiritual practice now, and it's been really beautiful and nourishing. So that's where I'm at with that. All right, y'all, that is it. That is tarot stuff for envelopes. That is journals. That is spiritual practice and faith journey. And that is it for my 2026 plans. There's all the usual stuff I will also be doing. Of course, I do daily draws. I do deck studies with my members, and got some really exciting things coming up with that. But that's the main 2026 massive info dump update. So let me know what you're working on this year. What is your spiritual practice? Are you doing envelopes? What decks did you pick? If you did, let me know. As always, appreciate you all so much. And extra big thank you goes to my Unicorn Fam channel members for all your support of the channel. You know I couldn't do any of this without you. So thank you. And until next time, y'all, may your magic always shine from the inside out. Bye.